What's up, everyone? It's Jordan, the lazy ass reefer, and today I kind of wanted to talk about something a little bit unique, something that I'm sure many people in the hobby don't have to think about, but that's doing water changes on your saltwater aquarium when you're on a septic tank. Now, this is a topic that if you Google, you'll get a lot of anecdotal evidence. You'll get the guy that did water changes on his reef tank and just poured the water down his drain for years and years and years and never had a problem. And then you'll have the guy that, of course, destroyed his septic tank and it backed up into his house, causing thousands of dollars in damages. And so, unfortunately, and then there's everyone in between. But I just wanted to kind of break down the subject and go over a few tips for those of you who live on septic tanks. So real quick, if you're not familiar with septic tanks, basically it's just a huge collection tank that's underneath your lawn, and all of your drains, as you can see here, will collect in this tank, and that's going to be your sinks, washing machine, your toilets, showers, everything. And what happens is the solid waste will collect at the bottom of the septic tank, and there's probably some sort of baffle in there. And then the water, which is sometimes called gray water, will flow out into your leach field where it's essentially purified by Mother Nature and eventually becomes groundwater, which could potentially be drinking water someday for, maybe not you, but maybe your kids or the next generation, whatever. And so now that we know how, in a basic sense, how a septic tank works, the question of what should I do with my water changes, comes up. So basically, a little backstory. I used to live in a suburban neighborhood, and I never thought twice about doing water changes because I knew that the water that I poured down the drain would just go to the county or city's collection facility and would be purified, and they would have to sort of deal with the salt and bacteria and whatnot. If you have a septic tank, you are responsible for basically what goes in there, and you're obviously responsible for making sure that your septic tank gets pumped of the solid waste, but you're also responsible for the physical health of your septic tank. And so, unfortunately, while doing research on this topic, a lot of conversation came up about water softeners. And so there's not too much guidance out there for people who have saltwater tanks. However, the EPA does have some basic guidelines that apply to everyone, which is just obviously regularly inspect your system and pump as necessary. Use water efficiently. This is important. And don't dispose of household hazardous waste in sinks or toilets, which is also very important. And then just care for your drain field. All of these apply, obviously, if you have a saltwater tank, but there's a couple that are especially important. And that's use water efficiently. They say, in this whole pamphlet, on a septic tank, it's very important to use water efficiently because the more water you have going into your septic tank right here, the more chances there are for this, like, we'll just call it sediment layer or sludge or whatever. This is the physical, solid waste. The more water coming in means there's a better chance of this being disrupted and this solid waste getting out into your leach field, which you don't want. This is harmful stuff. Yes, theoretically, Mother Nature could take care of it, but depending on how many people are in your household, it's just better to get this pumped out and go to a treatment facility. Especially if you're on a well, you do not want this human waste, just sitting around potentially getting into your well. And so they recommend water conservation, as even if that's aerating faucets, efficient washing machines, things like that. You just don't want that much water going in there. And then obviously not putting toxic chemicals down the drain because that can potentially damage your pipes. It can corrode the concrete. And then, of course, like I said, those harmful chemicals are going into the leach field, which there is no human intervention. Like, whatever you put down is going to go in here. And, if you're putting lots of oils, soaps, that can cause bubbling, and it can clog the whole thing up, and it's just overall not good for the septic tank, not good for the earth. So where does the salt water come into play? Like I said, there's not too much guidance, other than there's one important distinction on what type of septic tank you have, and that's whether it's aerobic or anaerobic. And literally the only thing that I was able to really find is that if you have a aerobic septic tank, putting salt water is not entirely harmful. In fact, the Water Quality Association says that the calcium and magnesium can actually improve bacterial growth and development. And I did see some other websites saying that it can actually be beneficial for like the grass and whatnot growing around it. However, if you're on a anaerobic septic tank, the salt water can displace the solids, which will then pass them into the drain fields, risking untreated pathogen delivery to the groundwater. So like I said, I don't know, that's kind of where my knowledge ends. I don't know much about aerobic versus anaerobic, but like I said, these are these solids that you want to get trapped in here and pumped out. And if it's a anaerobic system, the higher volume of water and salt coming in here can displace this human waste and get it out into your leach field, which again, I think I've already said like 5 times, obviously you don't want. And then going back to the use water efficiently, it really depends on if you have a nano tank, if you have a 75, a 375. I mean, how much water? This is the kind of the internal conversation that you need to have with yourself as far as how much water you're changing out, the volume, and how frequently you're doing it. I'd say if you have a nano tank or something smaller than say like a 75 and you're just doing bi-weekly water changes, probably not that big of a deal as far as the water volume. However, there's one indisputable fact, which is salt water is extremely corrosive. We've all seen that on our tanks. Pretty much anything that is able to get salt splash on it or salt creep will corrode if it's not plastic or whatever. Salt water is very corrosive to concrete, and so there's no cut and dry answer as far as how much salt water going through here. There's no formula that says, well, if you put 10 gallons of salt water in blah, 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 like this will happen. You just don't know. But we do know that salt water is damaging to the septic tank, specifically the parts that are made out of concrete. So it will corrode. And to me, it's like, well, why risk it? If you're putting X amount of salt water in there, that you're damaging your septic tank, then the variable in that equation is that at some point, potentially, your septic tank will fail, which could mean all this nasty human waste coming back up your drains like this, or it could just mean a massive clog, which could mean human waste coming up the access cover right here, going into your yard. You don't want that. It's extremely expensive. You could potentially, you don't want the county and the inspectors coming down there and having to explain to them that you flooded your entire lawn with human waste because your septic tank failed because you've been putting salt water in it for years and years and years. There's probably fines associated with that, and you're going to have to get it repaired and cleaned up. And that's just a situation you don't want to be in. So what do you do with your salt water? Again, this is an area where I could not find any conclusive information. It was all anecdotal, so you're going to have to use common sense and just see what works for you. And now I know we all have RODI systems installed because we hate lugging water back and forth from the local fish shop. And that's why we make our own water at home. However, one potential solution, as opposed to putting in your septic tank that you could do, is collect it and then every so often bring it to your local fish shop and ask them if you can dispose of it there, because they're doing tons and tons of water changes, and so they obviously are disposing it, and chances are they are on city water, and so it's going to go to a treatment facility. So you could do that. You could ask them if you can dispose of it there. You could ask a friend if you can dispose of your salt water at their house. It'd be kind of a weird conversation to have and to bring up, like, hey, can I dispose of salt water at your house? But I'm sure if you were to explain to them and they're a cool friend, they'd probably be okay with it. Like you just bringing a couple jugs of water and just pouring it down their toilet. I don't think they'd have a problem with that. Like I said, kind of a weird topic to bring up, though. Some people have said that you can dispose of it on your lawn. I would obviously be very careful as to the effects of that as far as damaging your grass. And some people said you can do it on weeds and whatnot. I would just be very careful of how much you're pouring, and like I said, diversifying where you're pouring it so you're not getting any sort of salt buildup in one area. You can pour it on your driveway in the wintertime. Obviously, I wouldn't do it if it's concrete, but if it's gravel or asphalt, you could do that. Again, I would diversify where you're doing it because you still don't want salt build up on your driveway. And the last, I personally probably wouldn't do this, but I did see one person saying that they like pour it into like a river. I mean, I guess if it's a large volume of water and it's fast moving, you could do that. I don't know how I personally feel about that, because you are putting salt water into a freshwater system. But you could, I guess, argue that Mother Nature will just figure it out, and it's 5 gallons of salt water going into thousands and thousands of fast-moving fresh water. I don't know. Like I said, I personally probably wouldn't do that, but it's if I had to choose between doing that and putting in my septic tank, I would probably do that. Just because septic tanks, if you're living in an older house, it's been there for so long, and it's just one of those things that people don't think about. Like, what is the health of my septic tank? Am I killing off the beneficial bacteria? Am I corroding it? Like, is it about to collapse? And one important note too is that septic tanks are essentially like stomachs. They consume everything that we put down the drain, and so there's beneficial bacteria in there, reducing some of the harmful elements in this human waste, not all of it, which is why we get it pumped. But it helps break it down and turn it into this like slurry, I guess some people call it. And that just helps. It's a biological filter. And the more stuff that you put in there, it's going to throw off that biological process. And like I said, it's just going to throw it all out of whack. So if you're on a septic tank, I would love to hear what you do with your salt water. Maybe you have a method that I didn't cover, that I didn't think about. I just try to come up with some simple, easy. The emphasis is on easy, because if it's a pain in the butt, you're not going to do it long term. And I know that's why the idea of bringing your water change water to a local fish shop or a friend's house just seems ridiculous. And it's not the perfect answer, unfortunately. And like I said, I did a little bit of research on this and was unable to find any super helpful information. Basically just a bunch of people in forums arguing about whether it's damaging to your septic tank or not. So yeah, that's about all I got. Like I said, if you're on a septic, I'd love to hear your feedback, your experiences. Maybe you're one of those people that's been doing it for 20 years and your septic tank is routinely passes inspection, or maybe you're the guy that did it occasionally for a couple of years and then had some sort of catastrophic failure. Hopefully there's not too many of you that had that happen, because I don't wish that on even my worst enemy. That's just a nightmare that I want to avoid. And yeah, that's all I got for today. If you hit the subscribe button, you'll find out about my next video, which is going to be just showing how I upgraded my VPAR Spectra 165 watt LEDs to using the SB Reflight diodes. That was actually a very easy upgrade, and I'm excited to share that video with you guys. And if you liked this topic, you thought it was a little bit unique, or you learned something, hit the thumbs up button, because like I said, this is a unique, kind of weird topic to talk about, but I figured it'd be educational, and maybe people could learn a thing or two, and we could ultimately have a conversation about what to do with salt water when you do water changes. So that's all I got for today, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy. I'm in the mood, so give me the drum and the bass.